So I'm going to be slightly teacher-like and notice that it's 7 o'clock. So I very much want you to talk about this later in the show, Kath.
Oh.
But I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I'm Michael Strong in the dark at Expanse outside of Austin where the power's off. So we might get light later, but I'm here with my two colleagues, Matt and Kath. And Matt, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Happy to. Good evening, everyone. Matt Barnes. I'm a co-founder of The Education Game, and we are a platform, blogging, podcasts, workshops, all aimed at helping parents learn how to lead their child's education rather than trust that the school will do it for them. That's my world and what I do, and so I think I pass it over now to Kath.
Yes, hi, I'm Catherine Fraise. I'm the founder of Workspace Education and our research and development company, 100 Roads, our nonprofit, where we are helping people who want to create alternative learning spaces. We help them design it and accompany them on their journey. We've learned a lot from creating our prototype at Workspace Education. We also support parents. We help people create personalized pathways for their children, and generally are there for anybody who is excited and wants to create an alternative learning space for their family, for their child, for their community.
You guys are so great at talking about what you're about that I missed that. So I'll just say we're a talent development accelerator for children 10 and older. And one of the things I like that I'm going to use this to launch today's show with is Matt Barnes, who, as he says, used to be in healthcare, said if your child is not thriving, it should be like, you know, you're a mom in the emergency room and you're not getting attention for your bleeding child fast enough. Yeah. And so suppose, and from my perspective, if your child is not thriving, if your child is not full of vitality and excitement, enthusiasm, if your child does not love learning, does not love their current school, get them out. But that's easier said than done, and we want to acknowledge that. So I'll go to my co-moderators and say, what do you do if your child's not moderating? You go home and cry? I mean, not moderating. What do you do if your child's not thriving? Yeah, do you go home and cry, or what do you do? We should be more practical, I think.
Kath, you want to start?
Well, sure, right. Like, it's just so heartbreaking. You know, I had that happen with my son, you know, and it was like Friday night. He was already like starting to get anxious about Monday. He didn't enjoy the weekend because he had just so much anxiety surrounded by having to go to school. And I'm just sort of like, I remember it with my daughter, and my children were in Montessori schools when they were younger. So we're not talking like some awful public school. But I was finding that, you know, they'd come home from school and I'd be unpacking all the social stuff that had gone on, and I hadn't been there and I didn't really know what had been going on. And, you know, when I pulled them out to homeschool, well, really just to get them out of the system, because I didn't feel like I was really addressing their needs. All of that went away, and I started really listening to your children, to my children, and what they really needed. And then tried to work out from them what it is that would really make them thrive and get really excited about learning. So the most simplest thing you can do, I think, when you're first starting, when you decide to pull your child from school, is to really just sit down and listen. And that simple act of just listening to your child every day is going to give them so much confidence that, first of all, they're being listened to, but in their opinion and what they're thinking and feeling. So that is really the first step when you pull your child out of school and try and work out what to do, because there's no manual that's been written telling you what to do. It's really, unfortunately, we give birth and we don't have this manual about what your child's going to be like and what to do, and all the education models, and we haven't really explored this. We haven't had children before, right? So you get to this point and we just don't really know what to do. So there's this feeling that you won't know. And it's just this fear of the unknown that really stifles parents' ability to feel confident in making the right moves, right? Mm-hmm. But the right move is always something that is completely in line with your child. And you are really an observer and an investigator and a detective to work out what that is. No school is going to be able to do that for you, right? They're just going to say, well, this is what normal looks like. right? And average looks like, and you're either, you're trying to get your child into that. But we all know that every child is very unique and special, and we don't want our child to be average. We want to unlock their potential at being them, their essence, right? So how do you do that? And the very first place to start is actually the most simplest thing, which is just to really listen. And then after you've been listening for a while, then you can start working out a plan. Would you agree, Matt?
I love that. Yes, listening. One of the things that I mention to parents when I work with them is to ask them a really simple question, picking up on what Kath just talked about. Ask your child a question: what are you curious about? What's something something that you are interested in? And then whatever their answer, compare that answer to what they're getting in their school. And 9 times out of 10, there is absolutely zero overlap, right? Or worse yet, you have a kid who says, I don't know what I'm interested in, because no one's ever asked them, right? The school never says, today we're going to learn about what Jimmy wants to learn about, right? That doesn't happen. So yes, step one, asking and trying to understand, listen to your child really in a different way. But part of that is also, I would argue that maybe 1 or 2 step is to define what success actually means, right? So when we step into the educational world, success is a very narrow band of that's defined for us, and that usually has to do with college and career. College and career. You're successful if you go to college. You're successful if you have a well-compensated career. I would argue that the more important question is one we've talked about on the show before, is who do you want your child to be as an adult? Who, not what, who do you want them to be? Usually those are issues around character. Usually those are issues around a love of learning, a passion for something, a desire to serve, a desire to change this broken world. Those are the things that when you actually stop and say, what does a successful young adult look like? It's a kid who knows those things. And again, I will ask you the question, compare the kids that you know in your community. How many of them have a real sense about a purpose for their life? How many of them have a real sense about a passion that is drawing them to work harder and faster than anybody else because they've been captured by some idea or some concept or some project that they want to now solve? If that is part of your definition of success, the traditional school simply cannot and will not support that definition. So that's another part. What does success actually look like? And then working backwards from there, you'll find a huge gap between that definition and a typical school's outcomes.
I couldn't agree more, Matt, because most people that I meet when they've pulled their children out, the first thing that they're thinking of is, okay, the goal is here to get this kid into college, right? But, to me, it's like, well, the goal for me, I mean, like college is a stepping stone in my child's life, that in both of my children's life, they will go to college, but that's not my ultimate goal, right? My ultimate goal is for my children to be happy, to have a purposeful life, to know who they are, to be fully and authentically expressing themselves in whatever way that they choose to be doing that. And I know that they have plenty of time over a lifetime, right, to go to any college, to do anything that they want. Like I've seen my life where I've zigged and zagged through different careers, doing all sorts of things, and you have time for it all.
Right.
Now, if being on the conventional timeline is going to stretch your child out, right, and like force the bulb, so to speak, so that your child doesn't have time to explore and doesn't learn that it's okay to really discover who, to take the time to discover who they are, right?
Yeah, that's
right. I mean, how many people have been to college and they've got absolutely no clue what they want to do, right? And is that a relationship to being stuck within these 4 walls and not having enough time to explore?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or for learning or being forced down this pathway of learning that's very, very book related, right? When we all know, right, that how our brains are wired is to make these associations and right, to build our intelligence by making all these connections with all sorts of different things. And how can you make those connections when you're stuck in these four walls, right? You need to be going out in the world and discovering and having that time, having those experiences that are going to be forging who you are as a human and what you're going to be doing in your life.
That's right. That's right.
So just because I understand why you're emphasizing that, Kath, and because I actually love books, I'm going to also say that, you know, in my kids, and Andrew, I'll get to you in a minute, but the opening question is, what do you do if your kid is not thriving? So I had two kids who were in an elementary school. They were not thriving. We went to the lunchroom, saw what it was like, immediately pulled them out, never thought about it twice. And I would say if your kid, so one of the things we talked about earlier is different things for different kids, but if your kid is reading and writing and doing a bit of math, I would say if they're completely unschooled, that is, you do absolutely nothing, but they're active readers, writers, and they're doing a bit of math, they'll probably be better prepared to get into most community colleges at the age of 16 than are 90, maybe 80 to 90% of students who went through school. So first of all, if your kid's a reader or writer and you get them doing a little bit of math, forget school, it's a waste of time, probably damaging them. But with that, before I start ranting some more, Andrew, what do you do if your kid's not thriving?
Oh, you mean every child?
Yeah.
Do I tell my daughter's situation in another flavor? Should I do that?
Yeah.
Should I do that?
And action items. We're looking for action items to help parents who, you know, what do you actually do?
I think the one that really surprised me was I thought I had, you know, I had three kids, wonderful kids, right? And you know, two of them were straight A's, and one of them was getting A's and D's, and I guess that's where the ADHD comes from, right? And and I pathologized, and the system pathologized the one, right? And kind of do this whole digging into it, what's going on, and took me many years, right? Lots of challenges, right? And clearly, his performance was far outside of the system, right? And very, very uneven. And then I looked at the other two, and I had one really, really smart kid that would just on some subjects would just totally disconnect, right? And one day I asked him, like, you know, why don't you like this thing, right? And it was like some good soul searching, right? We come down to the bottom of it. He got a C sometime in class, right? And I talked to him, and it was like this grade had been pushed down to him, right? Without any dialogue, without any real connection, right? And he's like, oh, I guess that's not for me, right? And you know, as a ninth grader, he had his soul crushed in something. And I was like, I looked at that and I saw that capability that he could have had for years, right? You know, you get a C in math in ninth grade for some accident, right? And now the system doesn't recover you. It doesn't recognize you as an individual. It's like, you got this grade, you got what you deserve, right? Whatever they call it, right? But then, you know, he loses motivation for things, right? And then I look at my daughter, who was this top student, you know, A's and everything, top test scores, right? And then I find out she's got incredible anxiety and performance over making sure that she gets those grades. And so I think I made the mistake as a parent thinking that I had one kid that wasn't being served by the school system. And in reality, I had all three of them that weren't being served by the school system.
Right.
What do you do? Immediately, you know, tune back their involvement to whatever extent you can in the school system, lighten up their load, right? Give them other avenues outside of school to start to expand in, try different programs, right? So I would say, you know, spend time, you know, figure out what the bare minimum they need right then to keep continuing on, so that you don't, like, you know, so you keep your options open in the future. But I feel strongly, like, if I were to redo this again with my kids, obviously I would have created this whole program, your program, gotten my kids out, right? But even if that weren't available, I think I would have really lightened the load on them in school and had them just pursue so many more things outside of school. just because those places wouldn't crush their souls.
And there are so many, Andrew. Like, you know, I recommend to parents to find something like a theater group.
Oh, love it.
In a theater
Love
group,
it.
right?
Oh my gosh, so much better. So much better for your life. So much better for whatever you're going to do in life. Like if you take theater, right? You know, that's the one thing that actually correlates with later on success in life. Right. The one subject you can take in high school. Amen. Sorry to interrupt.
Right. And no, but seriously, like in theater, they're doing literature, they are learning lines. So they're learning how to memorize, like their brain is being, you know, fortified. And then they have to actually act while they've got the memorized lines in, right? So they're making these complex neurons. They're getting that sense of community, right? They have these goals, right? Like that is going to give them the socialization. Like, you know, people say that, you know, if you pull them out of school, they're not going to be socialized, they're going to be at a kitchen table. That is so like 100 years ago. I mean, you know, and I've been homeschooling now for like 15 years or so. You know, these are not the homeschoolers I see. There aren't homeschoolers sitting around the kitchen table. You know, some choose to. I mean, there's some, I mean, when I say that, they might be in their rooms, they're not sitting around the kitchen table. That is sort of a concept people have in their minds. But quite a few people do choose to spend a couple of days at home doing their work, because that's where they can really concentrate. And they spend, you know, maybe 3 days out in the world doing different things, doing theater, being in homeschool co-ops, you know, being in places like Workspace, where they're getting their socialization and building and making and doing and experiencing the world.
So I want to talk about math for a bit, and I want to connect it to Matt's thing about creating a vision for your child, because I totally agree on the theater and the experiences and, you know, all the fun stuff. And I think math is one of the biggest sources of anxiety for a lot of parents. And I would say two things. One is, personally, I was a student who wanted to do a lot more math in school. As a teen, if I could have dropped out, I probably would have done 5 times as much math as I did in school, and my son basically did. And there are kids for whom the school system is actually slowing them down dramatically.
Dramatically. It serves no one, especially in a subject like math. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. But going back to Matt's piece of a vision, I think, you know, I've known students for whom math is very difficult and don't want to do math, and maybe they are just going to be a creative and do you know, video or whatever, and there are great careers in that. We can talk about great careers without much math, truly minimal math. On the other hand, there are students who love math, and, you know, if you can't do the math, hire a tutor, and for a small amount you can get a math tutor who will help your student learn way more math than they would have learned in school. And in between, there are also in between cases of students who don't love math but do want to go to college, and maybe they're interested in politics or government or society. And often I explain, and this goes to the coaching and vision, I explain, look, you will have a lot more credibility if you want to get into law or government or, you know, anything like that, if you have some mastery over statistics and data analysis. And so if the kid is not spontaneously interested in mathematics, and again, we've talked about the regular curriculum, Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, Pre-Calc, Calc is not optimized, but I like to motivate students who are on their own path, where they're the ones who love math, the ones for whom math is not great, but if there's a vision that might include having an impact on the world, I tell them, look, a certain mastery of statistics and data analysis is really valuable, and it's in your interest to get to the point where you can do that. And then again, if you can't do it as a parent, hire coaches, hire mentors, hire tutors who can crank them up so they can take a great stats course in high school or college, and then, you know, master whatever they want to in political science, economics, yada, yada, yada.
Amen. You know, I absolutely get them connected to a math that matters, right? You know, you dig into this math thing, and what you find out is it's the, you know, as we talked about last week, is the highest ivory tower from which people can look down upon you from, right? The second thing that I think I want parents to be aware of, and I believe this very strongly, is there is no such thing as a math person and not a math person. And what can easily happen, and really keep an eye out for this with your kids, is it takes one traumatic math experience to shake a child off the math train. And because it's so hierarchical, because it's so because it's moving at such a fast rate, right? You sometimes, if you don't get them back on that train immediately, right, they now feel lost, right? Everything else after that, they feel like they're not a math person, right? Don't let the system do that to your child, right? If it happens, if you see it happen, get a tutor immediately, get them back on that math train. Why it happens, I believe strongly that we teach math all wrong, right? And we teach it not as the beautiful language that it is, a tool to be used like writing, like communication, right? Like English, right? But we teach it as this, exercise of, how many people can do what, how fast, and who can do it, who can calculate their times tables faster than somebody else under a stressful circumstance. So, don't feel like, don't let the system get you down or your child down about whether they're a math person or not. Everyone can learn to love it as a language, right? There may be a certain amount of damage that's already been done, right? And how you approach getting that healed is a different matter. But if you see it happen in your child, if you see them kind of start to drop off a little bit, don't wait at all. Make sure you get them support and have them back on that math train so that they don't fall further behind and feel further disenfranchised or unmotivated because of the system.
So I want to respond to that, and then I want Matt to connect this to his version of creating a vision for your child. One of the things is to really emphasize the math wounded. I would say I see a very large number of children who've been wounded mathematically, and for the first what do you do? For the first 3 to 6 months, maybe a year, recovery. Basically, they're in recovery from damage from the school system, and my number one thing is to help them become confident about mathematics. So before trying to do any, as it were, forward progress, my number one goal is give them confidence so that they know that they can do math and that they can go as far and as fast in math if they want. And it really is a matter of them choosing their math game to play, as opposed to being forced and beat up by a cruel and inhumane system.
Amen. I feel bad. I mastered that system. Right. I had no idea the carnage it leaves behind. For every A plus out there, there's some kid getting a B, a C, or whatever, being told you're not a math person, you're not smart, because you can't calculate numbers quickly, under stressful circumstances. Because something, guys, guess what? If I have more than 3 numbers to add, it goes into a spreadsheet. So I seem to have lost all my math ability, but seem to be functioning just fine in society.
Just one more thing before I let Matt or Kath go, but just when you say that, it makes me think that what people don't realize is most of math education in the United States is systemic bullying. It's systemic bullying by the mathematically capable against less. And every kid that goes up to the chalkboard and shows how smart he or she is, part of the subtext is, and look, I'm smarter than you idiots out there. I would say that happens in 8 or 9 times out of 10.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, so let me again, I'm trying to put I talk to parents all the time, and so this question, Michael, that you started at the beginning of, what are the steps that we would recommend for a parent? So much of this is highly specialized and individualized to the family and their circumstance, right? So single mom, I would answer that question very differently than a 2-parent household. A mom that stays home or a dad that stays home, I would answer that question very differently than, again, a 2-parent household where people are working. So much of this is unique to the circumstance, but there are certain principles that I'm going to go through. There are 5 that I tend to start with families. And it starts with this, with vision, and I mentioned it before. I recommend something called a dream map, and this is the idea of asking your child just you spend 20 minutes asking them to imagine their most wildly unrealistic dream that they can imagine, and you actually begin to put that on paper and start to talk to their child about how those dreams can actually be achieved. But again, it's getting the kid out of this idea that my only thing I focus on is grades, right? So that's like step 1. The step 2 is this gap analysis. Where do I hope my child to be? Where does my child want to be? and what are they being prepared for? And increasingly, y'all, this is a gap that is so obvious to anybody who's working in the professional world. The things that kids are being prepared for do not line up almost in any way with what the expectations of work and life are as an adult. So that gap analysis, that's kind of the space between what you want and what you're getting. Now to start to fill that gap, I talk about starting a streak. So pick one thing, parent, just one simple thing that you think you can do every single night with your child. And let me promise you, it's not going to be something like math. It's going to be something like reading together on the couch every night for 5 minutes. I mean, we're not making this a heavy lift, but the streak starts to remind the parent that you have the capacity to actually lead your child's learning. You can do it. You have done it already. You taught your child how to walk. You taught your child how to read. Maybe you taught your child how to eat with a spoon, right? These are things that you have taught your child, how to use the bathroom. You can continue to teach your child, but we need to now start with a streak, something that's super simple that allows you to begin to remember the capacities that you have as a parent. And then the next one is actually something that Andrew mentioned. You got to start a negotiation with your child's school. Now, this to me is the step that leads to eventual departure from the school, but I'm not suggesting any parent do that. It depends on their circumstance, but the negotiation looks something like this. And actually, you know what? Can I read something, a call that I took yesterday? Can I read this for a second real quick?
Go for it. Go for it.
So I'm going to read you verbatim what this parent said in their intro letter to me before we spoke. So we're currently at a private school in Chicago, which is very traditional. My son is a kindergartner, gets a major packet of homework each week that is literally sucking the joy out of our limited time together each evening. He can't sit anymore. He's exhausted. I think it's unhealthy, and there's no evidence homework of this kind, worksheets, is beneficial. So she goes on to talk about how she's worried that her child is starting to associate learning with pain and misery and unpleasantness. So in the negotiation that a parent would have with the school is, what in this packet of information is essential? Let's narrow this down to the bare essential, teacher, because this is killing my son or daughter. And I'm going to now step into the role of parent and protector to make sure my child, it doesn't get traumatized, as some have been talking about already. So those are the first 4 steps: vision, the gap analysis, starting a streak, and then starting the negotiation of lightening the load. And then the 5th one is you got to find assistant coaches that can help you with this process. These are other parents, relatives, neighbors who can come around you and your child to help provide additional supports. These are the supports that are going to be needed if and when it is time for you to say, you know what, I'm done with school. I'm actually going to do something else. You're going to need to have human support around that child. So those are the 5 pieces: vision, gap analysis, starting the streak, lightening the load, and then finding your assistant coaches. So that's my little monologue around how I would recommend families think about this.
I would add simply, if they're hesitating, I would say another path is just simply take them out the door and never go back again. But I realize not everybody, we're talking about this because not everybody's ready to do that. Nope. But I'd love to hear Kath talk about, so, you know, Matt's talking about assistant coaches and peer group. Earlier, we were talking about the importance of community. And I think a lot more parents would do this if they were immersed in a community where it was normal, where there were lots and lots of resources, whether those resources are, you know, online curriculum or coding or software, Nobel explorers, or people who you can talk to about it. So talk about community and what you're doing to help build community for anybody who wants to escape the system, Kath.
Well, absolutely. I mean, like, you know, I was homeschooling for a while, and you know, you find your people, and then you're like, well, it gets so good once you found your people and you have the socialization in place. You kind of know what you're doing. Your children are so much happier, and you go around with this stupid smile on your face, and you're like, oh my God, why isn't everybody doing this, right? But I also remember the time before I started homeschooling, and I was thinking, you know, I don't know if I'm going to meet anyone. You know, And what I did first, the very first thing was that I went onto Facebook and I started finding in my state, I looked at all the different Facebook groups. Well, it was really Yahoo groups at that time. And I started finding out who was organizing them, and I started contacting them, like, I'm thinking of this. And I did this like at least 6 months before I pulled my kids out. Like, I really wanted to get sort of an idea of the scene, where they sort of hang out, how they go about it. And I worked out things like, well, when you're first starting, you go to park days, right? And you want to go to park days and things like that the homeschoolers are organizing, because you'll get a big variety of different kinds of parents who have different ways that they educate their children. You know, you get people who completely unschool or don't have any curriculum, and you'll also get people who are really doing school at home, a very similar or very like a traditional offering, like, but in their home, and they might do, you know, 3 or 4 hours of homeschooling, and then in the afternoons the kids are free to run around and play, and they're all looking for friends. Like, it is really actually really awesome when you first start homeschooling and you realize that there's all these families out there that are looking for playmates and study mates and people to keep their kids company on their educational journey. So park days and, you know, anything like scratch soccer and things like that that are going on, go, and then just start talking to parents, right? So that is probably the first year of your homeschooling life, if you decide to do that, or home educating life, would be going out and finding the learning landscape that's out there. Homeschoolers are constantly looking for the best resources locally, so they are really knowledgeable people to ask about anything that you want to be doing or want to be finding. And they also probably have kids around the same age as you, and they already have been doing this for a couple of years, and they know the kinds of different curriculums people are doing out there, right? So really, what I was thinking was I would just find people that I thought, you know, the kids were really polite and kind, right? I want my kids hanging around with kids like that. So I'm going to find those people, and then I'm going to talk to the mum. If I like the mum, I'm like, yeah. So it's a little bit like family dating. And then I'm thinking, wow, my kid's playing really well with that one. I want to find out who's parent, right? Like, and you want to find these sort of informal ways that you can sort of on the sideline sort of find your people, right? And then once you find your people, it's like you've got a full tank of gas, and it's like, where should we go together, right? And it gets really, really exciting. They'll already be doing things that your kids can jump into, and maybe you have things to offer that they haven't thought of yet. Maybe you can do different things like Lego League, or you can do Destination Imagination, or some really great competition, and you start building your community like that. A new family moves in, or you know, they're new families post on Facebook. So you'll be like, oh, I live in that area. Maybe you want to meet us at a park day, and then they come to that park day, and you think, wow, this is a good fit for us. And communities build like that, and it happens really quickly.
Yep.
And you just might be really surprised at how beautiful the whole experience is. And all of a sudden you feel like your kids are surrounded by cousins, and it's a really warm, lovely experience, right? And now your kids are happy, and now you can concentrate on you know, what academics, you know, they need to have in place. And I did that almost the same way, but social always came first.
Yeah. And Kath, you know, it is so much more enjoyable. I mean, I think I want to really pick up on this point that Kath made about it's fun. It's so much more enjoyable, not just for the child, but also for the parent. Yes, there's an adjustment period where everybody's trying to figure out how does this work. But, you know, 99 times out of 100, everybody is so much, they're asking the question, why didn't I do this years before, right? Why did I take so long? And so what Kath is describing is a way that you maximize learning, but all types of learning, not just math and reading and science, but also social learning, environmental, you know, political learning, all these things that are possible when you get out of your home, when you get out of a classroom. Great example, my daughter, super interested in homelessness, and she's doing research right now at age of 15 on homelessness. Why? Because we got out of the school, we got out of the classroom, and she started to see this problem that was persistent in our community, right? Caused her to go, I want to do something about that. So that's the kind of learning that you can't get when you're sitting in a classroom. So continue to preach here on this.
So,
no, but it's so true. I'm sorry, Michael, but
go ahead.
the freedom that you have, like when you're not subject to the school system, all of a sudden, you know, when you can learn anything, right?
Yeah.
It's an incredible, incredible gift, right?
Yeah.
And we are charged with really listening to our children and working out like, wow, if we could learn any way, right? If we could learn anything, you know, how can I help my child be the most effective learner of anything?
Of anything. That's right.
Right? And that becomes the challenge, not whether he's done 4th grade math or some kind of state imposed milestone, right? Like, is my child, you know, like, how engaged is my child? Are they 100% engaged in their learning? Like, how much are they taking control of their learning?
Yeah.
Right? Are they excited to learn? Is there joy there? Like, these are the things that you can then measure if you're not so reliant on state testing. And if all these are in place,
So-
you're not going to have to worry about these tests because they're going to be learning so much, right? And then the stuff on the test starts feeling a little bit irrelevant.
A little irrelevant.
Or what really matters in life, you know? Like,
I think you know, when I think about gaming, some of the numbers I see is that 16% of boys are, quote, addicted to gaming, and addicted meaning it really interferes with the rest of their life, and some 5 or 6% of girls are addicted to gaming. I don't know how accurate those numbers are. When I look at gaming, I see something that you know, it was in my own kids, was in me, right? I became addicted to gaming when it was bad, right? When it was text on a screen, right? And then I had purpose with something. So with my son, you know, I started a business, and all of a sudden the game that I wanted to play was the business, right? And I think the challenge that we're faced right now is that gaming is more engaging than school, right? Much more engaging than school, and much more rewarding in their immediate sense than school is. But I'll say what happened with my own son, right? I got him involved with volunteering, right? I got him involved with building a Pinewood Derby track for the Cub Scouts. I got him involved with helping tutor other kids, and all of a sudden he didn't have time for the gaming anymore, right? And I think it's not an addiction to gaming as much as it is a deficit of purpose. And lots of times when the only thing you do is jam the schoolwork down kids' throats, and it's meaningless, and it gets thrown away, and it just comes with demotivating grades and what you've done wrong on it, right? And no accomplishments, nothing real, not really helping other people. It's not a surprise that they prefer gaming to that.
Sure.
And also the parents aren't helping necessarily. Like, you know, are these parents of children who game, like, talking to their kids and saying, hey, let's go, you know, hiking, or let's do things together? Like, often I think that, you know, that's the default, that's the easy default, and parents are like, well, he really likes that, so I'm just going to leave him alone. But it means that, you know, they're not having that time with their child.
I think it's a slippery slope, because it's a very hard thing. You know, I have to be honest. I made a mistake. You know, I let my kid do educational games as a very young child, and I didn't realize how much I was building up a gaming habit, right? And by the time, you know, when my son's now 24, right, and you know, I thought educational games were good, right? I mean, I just was not that aware enough, right? Now I would not have done the same thing. But I also think for even parents today, it's a very slippery slope. You know, you spend time with your kids, right? But so many of their friends, so many of their colleagues, so much of their status is involved in these gaming systems, that even if you are really well connected to your child, if you don't provide them with something else that has purpose, that that is more motivational than the gaming, it's an unbelievable battle to keep them away from the systems.
Yeah, that's right. I think you could make the same argument for some of the social media access, YouTube. I mean, these are all highly engaging activities, and yes, there's some learning value associated with them, but if they're not engaging in the world, in starting a business, in dealing with real life circumstances, it can absolutely withdraw into an environment where they're most of the time on a screen. Now, we'll say though, here's the other side of it. For any parent who has some interest in technology, I talked to a parent just a couple days ago who the whole family is interested in technology. Now, for those kids, they let their kids go deep into technology, and then they started to lever their interest in the game towards coding and towards improving their skills in the game by learning how to do basic coding. And so what ended up happening in each of these kids they loved playing the game, but they also started to realize that they can use coding to become better at the game. And by using the coding, they were learning a skill that then they began to become much more interested when they got to later middle school and high school. Now all of them are in the tech space. They still game, but they also have created these really great skills that are very marketable outside of it. So part of it could be the opportunity for the parent to actually shape how the game is going to be used. And is the game going to be a lever that you use to then build skills that you know your child are going to need? Or is it just an escape time for your child? And I would argue that the former makes sense, the latter does not.
And one of the things I'd like to call attention to is the importance of parents actually being leaders. One version of unschooling that I think is really problematic is when some unschoolers are dogmatic about, I will never interfere with my child's interests. So Andrew, I heard you saying, I got my child involved in. And Matt, I hear you saying, these people took the gaming and went someplace else. And Kath, you said, let's go for a hike. I think there's a version of unschooling which is completely hands-off. I think it's very wrong-headed. You don't have to coerce your child, but sometimes I think you do need to lead them in more positive and more diverse directions.
That's right.
Amen. And I think one of the reasons that model might still be around was that it's still preferable to what goes on in school.
That's right.
Right. So it's like, that's not good, but it's less worse than what's happening inside the four walls. That's my.
I have to also say that I was very judgmental of my son who I'm sorry. You
can apologize to him. We're okay.
He's not here.
We're good.
But he would watch people playing. He would watch YouTube videos of people playing video games, and I'd be like, "Dude, you're not even playing the game. It's bad enough that."
Oh wait. You mean sports? You mean like the NFL? You mean like
no, so he's watching people play a computer game, and I'm like on YouTube, and I'm like, you're not even playing the game. It's bad enough. Like I've let him play this game, right? He's not even playing the game. He's watching people playing the game. Right? But and I'm thinking like, how could you even be interested in that? To me, it was just like, when he could be reading a book or, and as teenagers apparently only read 8 minutes a day.
That's right.
That's a frightening statistic. But anyway, and then, I was thinking about it, like, why is he watching YouTube videos of people playing these games? And I think then he's watching it because he's making all these connections of what these other people are doing, right? And he's imagining himself in the same kind of situation where he'd be using these skills, right? And I totally didn't see the value that he was getting out of doing that. I was just being very judgmental. So I'm less judgy now. And I do think that some of the skills that he is getting a lot of social time, I have to say, from meeting with his friends online. And I think he will definitely use a lot of those skills in his future. There's a lot of good stuff that they're also getting from strategy and working in a team in some of these collaborative team games that he's doing. I just have a problem when it's taking too much of the day, and the opportunity cost of what he could be doing. And there has to be that balance between sort of hands-on in society or with humans.
Yeah. So yes, right. And I think that the challenge is, and it doesn't matter whether it's gaming, whether it's social media, or whether it's pawing through our phone for 3 hours a day, which, by the way, is what the average American does. So let's not limit our criticism to our kids, right? The average American paws through their phone for 3 hours a day. arguably 2 hours and 45 minutes of that is worthless, right? And we're wondering why people might have a lot of angst and worry and stuff. Well, that time in gaming, that time in social media, that time pawing through the phone, that's taken away from the rest of your life, right? You're not doing other good and useful things, right? And I think it's impacting us. It's impacting our kids in school. It's impacting their socialization. It's impacting us as adults. And I think we have to all recognize and see how we can stop being managed by the electronics and start managing them ourselves. And I think for me and my family, it's all been around getting them engaged in projects and teams with purpose that are arguably more addictive and better for them, right? The team of other people is more addictive than that game is.
It all goes back to purpose, Andrew.
Amen.
All of it goes back to purpose. And
Amen.
again, the parent, I would argue, again, I use language to try to help parents shake out of some of the funk and kind of the patterns that we get in. But I use language like, parent, you are a head coach. No coach would ever let their players just run around the field and do whatever they want in practice. There's got to be some shaping, some vision, some strategy around what happens. And so, and part of that strategy is helping your child to find their purpose. And once a child finds their purpose, you can actually start to step away, because now they are off to the races. They are now reading books. They are now seeking out advisors because they see value in helping them achieve their purpose. That is what I want for my kids. That's what I hear when I talk to parents. That's what they want for their kids. And to the degree we just take our hands off approach, we are like a coach standing on the sidelines, not saying anything to our valuable star players. And that does seem wrong-headed.
Right. So, it'd be really great if they were like instantaneously self-directed and would find their purpose on their own. But typically, and, even us, even adults, right?
Sure.
Need help, right? Need support group, right? To work out how to recreate ourselves into what we want to be.
That's
right. And that is changing all throughout our lifetimes. And just, I'm doing it right now, during COVID, it's been a great time of change. And we're all recreating ourselves, and your kids are the same way. They're just younger.
That's exactly right.
Right. And we want to develop talent. We want to develop our talent. We want them to develop their talent. So if we just are completely hands off.
Yeah.
Then they're not going to get the results that they could possibly get, right? So you're not going to help them unlock their potential.
That's right. Okay, so Kath, you are the resident expert in terms of families who have made the transition. What do you think are the top 1 or 2 or 3 barriers to a parent actually stepping out of the system? And what would you suggest to them to fill those barriers? Pick 1 or 2.
Yeah, so by far the biggest one is fear, right?
Okay, fear.
Right, we have
fear
society, fear that they're not going to get into a college and everyone's going to judge them, right?
Okay.
That they're not going to be able to actually homeschool them because they've never done it before, and they've waited this long, and now they're like, it's just very, very scary, right?
Right.
And how I would help them assuage that fear would be to say that the most important thing is not that you teach them. You can outsource the teaching. There is just thousands of different ways to learn anything online or in person. It's about you deciding, right, that you're going to be their accountability person, or you're going to find someone who can be their accountability person, right? So that they can create their goals, and that coach, like you keep talking about, which is so brilliant, is going to be that person that's going to be helping them, right?
Yeah.
Work out what they need to do, how to create those work habits so they can actually work independently. Right. And they can rely on themselves to do what they've intended to get closer to their goal. That pathway, right, needs to be broken down in a lot of very, very small goals at the beginning, right? And then over time, they develop that muscle, right, to have that enough discipline to be able to do that for themselves, right? But that could take a year, right? A year or 2 years to do that.
Got it. So hold on, let me pause you. So you're saying this is, and I love the analogy of like weight training. You have to, building muscle takes time. It's a slow process. And so you're saying it can take months before a child can start to assume more responsibility for the work that they're doing.
Right. It's like, yes, that, but I mean, like, there's a couple of muscles here that we're trying to build. So one is their ability to work independently towards a goal that they want, right? And the second thing is for them to create the internal fortitude to understand what is actually resonant and what resonates with them as far as what they like to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they haven't had permission to do that before necessarily in an academic setting or in any setting.
Got it. So let me pause you. So fear is the issue, but you're saying that parent understanding how one gets through this kind of this transition period is a way to help reduce the fear and anxiety that a parent may have.
Right. See, once they've become self-directed, right, and they know what they want to do, and you can find those pieces, those academic pieces that will give you confidence that they're going to get wherever they need to go, right? Then you're not going to feel that fear anymore because you're not going to worry that they won't get into college, which even if you don't necessarily think that's the end goal for you, you have this societal pressure from relatives, from people in your neighborhood that they're all going to think, well, why didn't you just let the school sort out your child, right? Because then you can go and do something else. You can work, or you can go get your nails done or whatever, right?
Right. I could get my nails done, that's for sure. But again, this issue of fear is a really potent one. You're saying that it's driven by kind of societal expectations, our friends, etc.
And your own self-doubt as a mother or as a parent.
That's right. That every parent has, which is, am I hurting my child? Am I going to, regret this move at some point in the future?
Right.
All right. So what's the second barrier, do you think, that most parents or many parents have to?
Well, I think the working situation. It's like, I don't have time, right? So time, like, what's it going to take? Like, I need to be spending this much time. What's my child going to do during that time? Especially when they're not self-directed yet.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So then again, it's the parent saying, am I going to have to be what I think about as a traditional homeschooler, which means I'm sitting across from a table with my child for 7 hours a day, one-on-one, in a very oftentimes a tense environment. Or if I'm working full time, how do I make that even work? So how does one make that work?
Well, I think that we make the mistake thinking that we can do it on our own. All right. And it is a really heavy lift to do it on your own. Yeah. Right. And the idea of workspace is that we create these environments in community so that we can work with other parents to get everybody's needs met. Also, when you start really talking to your child, listening to your child, right? And they feel listened to, they want to contribute to the whole, to the community, right? They're not rebelling against you. They're not rebelling against a bad situation. You can say to your child, look, I really want to make this work, but mummy has to work, right? I've got to work these hours. I can be with you in these times. Like, let's have a meeting at the beginning of the day. You set yourself up for what you're going to be doing or whatever. And then we check in at lunchtime, we check in at 4 o'clock, right? By 4 o'clock, this needs to be done, or however you want to set it up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not because when you're homeschooling, it's not like you have to be like, well, we have to be in session at 9 o'clock because that's when school starts officially in the town, right? And finish at this time because that's when it finishes in the town.
Right.
You can be very flexible in that. And your husband or you can split responsibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. So really what you're talking about is there's a plan, and that plan creates a new model of what learning looks like. It is not school at home. It is learning that now is being organized.
It's learning anyway, anytime, right?
Yeah.
But it's doing it in line with the family's values, right?
Right.
With the resources that the family has.
And aiming at a goal that the family decides is important to them rather than the goals that a legislator in the state capitol has set as a priority for the kids. Awesome.
Right. And colleges too. I mean, colleges are big business. They want you to do this 4-year thing because they get a ton of money from it.
Yes, they do.
Why don't you do college over 6 years, right? And then also do an internship at the same time. So you end up with all this 6 years of experience, right? Plus your degree.
So that point right there. So now we're saying, I'm hearing you say this fear is actually there's actually missing the opportunity that comes from doing
Right.
something differently. And so there's also a book that I would recommend by a guy named Blake Bowles. It's called, well, there's got two. One is called College Without High School. And the other one he just released not too long ago called Why Is Your Child Still in School? Those are both great books that help a parent realize the opportunities that are out there. Now, speaking of opportunities, Andrew, I want to go back to you. I think we've lost Michael. I don't see him showing back up, so I'm just kind of taking over the quarterback here. Andrew, you're the tech guy in the room, right? So help us understand if I'm a parent and now I'm wondering, like, do I go ahead and make the jump outside of a traditional learning environment? What is possible in the tech world for a child that wasn't possible, just 5 years ago, and certainly is not possible in a school context? Give me some sense of what's out there and what things may be coming down the line.
You guys, Google did a release their data science and marketing curriculums, right? And they basically say, and they've got a publicly available policy that basically says we don't care if you go to college or not, right?
Google,
right? And
everyone's heard of that company.
and this is stuff that you can go. An ambitious 12-year-old could start this program, right? And it's something they're interested in, right? They do the mastery, they do the work. Google will hire people with those skills and put them to work. And obviously you get opportunity and then you're working in a real environment. But no college degree required, nothing other than you do the certification program. It's not a trivial program, right? This is serious learning, right? But it's self-directed. It's something that you can do on your own. You don't have to pay for it, right? Google is doing this as a tremendous service, not only for their attracting employees, but to also helping educate people and for people to know, hey, here's really valuable skills that you can have. So that stuff is out there. It's coming from Google. It's coming from a lot of other sources, but when it comes from Google, that this is there for purpose and for getting real jobs.
Yeah, but Apple, Amazon, Walmart,
they're all doing it.
I think maybe Home Depot. It's like there's a bunch of companies that are all following suit in the sense of we want to make sure you have skills. We care less about the degree you have from a four-year institution.
They don't care.
Mm-hmm.
The party's over. The house is crumbling. Higher ed. I was at a higher ed conference about a year and a half ago, and there's a person from Amazon Educate, and they were talking to all the higher ed institutions in the Washington, D.C. area, right? And the person says, hey, we have this curriculum. When we release it, you better hurry up and incorporate it because they change their curriculum so often, right? And it was kind of like a shot across the bow to the higher ed institutions. Don't take 3 years to integrate our stuff.
Oh, wait. So wait, you're saying Amazon was saying to the universities, we're changing, monthly or annually. And
every couple of years, we're training our certifications, and so you need to hurry up and get them into your system.
The university takes 10 years to change its processes on anything. I've been on the board of a couple of universities. It takes 10 years to do anything.
So Amazon's like, hurry up. And oh, by the way, we need kids to have these soft skills, right? And then the guy kind of slips because he's talking to a higher ed conference. He's like, yeah, but if they don't have either one of these by the time they get to college, it might be too late. Mm-hmm. And you realize that basically he just said, you can go do this. You got a kid who does it, learns these soft skills, right? We don't really care if you went to university or not.
Yeah.
Right.
So that is a very, very, very troubling thought to a parent who knew how to play the game for themselves. They were successful at it, and they know how they're going to drive their child to do the same thing that they did. So you're saying that strategy now is outdated.
It's crumbling, right? The traditional 4-year institution, the majority of those degrees don't do anything for you professionally. I'm not saying that there aren't ones that do. There are certainly programs that do phenomenal things in nursing and engineering and accounting. There's other professional degrees, but a lot of these 4-year degrees are not useful, right? And oh, by the way, you need to really acquire the skills. If you want to get jobs, there are very specific skills you need, and they may not be coming from the universities.
Yeah. And so to Catherine, I think you both have said the same thing, which is not only these 4-year degrees are dropping in value, but you could be taking courses at the local university or community college and working and building a portfolio of your own abilities and getting college degrees at the same time. So when you do turn 18, you may have a degree already and have a bunch of years of experience under your belt as well. And now from a business point of view, now you're in the business world, Andrew, do businesses really, are they really going to value somebody's work and someone's tangible documented skills over their degree? Or is this something that you're hoping for? That give me some better sense about what you're seeing in the business world around this.
We no longer hire for degrees. We're finding we almost don't care anymore. So sometimes the degrees will indicate to you, does someone have a persistence, but that can easily be shown up in a workplace at accomplishments, right? Are they willing to stick with something for 4 years, right? There's people out there that you see them bounce from place to place to place. And I don't care how long you're at your educational institution. If you can't stay someplace for more than 2 years, I'm not interested in you, right? So one, we do look for signs of persistence, that they've gotten deeply involved in things, that they've committed long-term, they've added value. And we're done.
Sorry, I just realized we're out of time here, but finish your thought and then we'll close it up. Sorry.
But we are past the point of looking at degrees, and we are looking for skills, we're looking for attitudes, and we're looking for all those other trainable items. We're looking for almost nothing that's coming out of universities now.
Yeah. Well, I was not paying attention to the time, but sorry we lost Michael. But we're out of time today. This has been a great conversation. Kath, Fraise, Andrew, Sachs, thank you for helping parents, myself, and many other parents try to understand how to navigate this new world of learning. And we're hopeful that this conversation was helpful. I'm Matt Barnes, and this is When School Isn't Working. So we'll hope to see you again here next week. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Thank
Take
you.
care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay.